So in this video, we will be talking about the two senses that are involved with the ear, that is hearing and equilibrium. And we'll start by talking about the anatomy of the ear. So if we look first at the most lateral portions of the ear, we find ourselves in the outer ear. The outer ear, and I wish I had the picture here, but if you're following along in your book, that's on page 457. The outer ear begins at the auricle, which is what we think of as that flap of skin that we generally skin and connective tissue that we generally refer to as the ear. That's the auricle, and the shape of the auricle helps to collect sound waves, and we know this because if you put your hands behind your ear, or put a hand behind an ear, and in a sense enlarging that funnel of the auricle, you'll find that you can actually collect more sound. So the auricle collects those sound waves and then funnels them into the tube that dives deep into the temporal bone. That tube is the external acoustic meatus. And the tube there is what carries the sound waves to the vibrating tympanic membrane. So what sound waves are is pressure waves in the air. So that pressure wave of sound causes the air to move back and forth. And so when the air pushes back and forth, pushes against and then stops pushing against, then pushes against in the next wave and stops pushing against the tympanic membrane, it causes the tympanic membrane to vibrate back and forth, just like a drum head will vibrate back and forth when you beat it with a drumstick. And so this creates vibrations then that are transferred into the middle ear. The middle ear is an air-filled space that is open to the external environment. It's opened by a tube called the auditory tube, also known as the eustachian tube, but old Eustace is getting his name stripped off of that. The auditory tube connects down into the pharynx, so it makes moves from its more superior location where it empties into the middle ear, and then down to the pharynx where it empties into the pharynx. And the primary structures of the middle ear are the three auditory ossicles: the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. So if you remember back to third grade or whatever it was, whatever grade you were in when you learned the names for the bones in the middle ear, the malleus is the hammer, the incus is the anvil, and the stapes are the stirrups. And as the tympanic membrane vibrates, it causes the malleus to move back and forth. And as the malleus moves back and forth, the incus then is forced to move back and forth. And then finally the incus moves the stapes back and forth. And that process of transferring the energy, that vibrational energy, from the tympanic membrane to the three bones of the middle ear amplifies those vibrations so that they are about 20% stronger when the vibrations make it to the oval window. The oval window is another membrane similar to the tympanic membrane, but this is a membrane that covers an opening into the inner ear. So we transfer via the three auditory ossicles the vibrations that we get when we're hearing. We transfer them into vibrations at the oval window, but those vibrations are much stronger when they arrive at the oval window. There's also a reflex because there are muscles connected to the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, and there's a reflex that helps to dampen their movement. So when there's a really super loud sound that happens, then those muscles that are attached to the auditory ossicles will prevent them from moving as much. And so that prevents the ossicles from moving, and as a result reduces the amplification effect of the three auditory ossicles. And again, we've got the auditory tube that connects the middle ear to the pharynx. All right, let's see if there's anything else that I missed. Okay, I think we've got it all. And then finally, we have the inner ear. The inner ear is built of a labyrinth, it's called. This is a system of interconnected chambers and tubes that are burrowed into the temporal bone. The connection between the middle ear and the inner ear is that oval window, that thin membrane. And if we could pierce then the oval window and travel into the inner ear, we would be inside the labyrinth. And there are two components to the labyrinth. There's the osseous labyrinth, which is the bone cavity. But lining that bony cavity is a second labyrinth that is that's built of a membrane, and we refer to that as the membranous labyrinth. And it lines the osseous cavities in most cases, although it doesn't always follow every contour of the osseous cavity. There's a lot of space sometimes, I guess what I'm trying to say, there's a lot of space sometimes between the membranous labyrinth and the osseous labyrinth. And that space between the bone and the membranous labyrinth is filled with a fluid that's referred to as perilymph. And then the cavity that is inside of the osseous labyrinth, that's filled with a different fluid that doesn't communicate directly with the perilymph, called the endolymph. So perilymph is between the bone and the membranous labyrinth, and the endolymph is what fills the interior of the membranous labyrinth. Wow, those are all hard to say when you say them really fast. And so the three groupings of chambers of the labyrinth are the vestibule, and the vestibule houses the organs that are responsible for the sense of static equilibrium. The cochlea, which is a coiled chamber that houses the organs that are responsible for sensing sound, the vibrations, the pressure waves in air. And then the third group of chambers are the semicircular canals, and they house the organs that are responsible for the sense of dynamic equilibrium. So we have three senses. Two of them are equilibrium senses. One of them is the hearing sense, that are found in the ear, or associated with the ear. And all those organs are found in the inner ear. So hearing, how does hearing work? So again, I would encourage you to refer to your book. And now you may want to look at Figure 1212 on page 461, as well as Figure 1211 on 460. Now, I want you to not be confused. In Figure 1212, they show the cochlea, and then they show the cochlea as if it could uncurl. And that is not possible. It's a bone, so it's bony. It doesn't uncoil. What they're attempting to demonstrate with that picture in 1212 is that if it was possible to uncoil the membranous, the bony labyrinth, you would see that it's this cone-shaped chamber, and that interior to that cone-shaped chamber, there are two chambers that are filled with perilymph, and then we have the membranes of the membranous labyrinth that create a cavity that is filled with endolymph. So the membranous labyrinth are the purple-looking structure in that picture on 461, and the interior there of the membranous labyrinth, that's where the organs of hearing are found. So the cochlear duct is the membrane-lined cavity of the membranous labyrinth, and it is equipped, that membrane is equipped with about 16,000 different hearing receptor cells. They're called hair cells. And these hair cells have a structure called a stereocilia. The stereocilium, the plural is stereocilia. These are hair-like extensions that will that respond to movements in the endolymph. The low-frequency vibrations, what we think of the low notes, those, so the bass notes, that are sensed at the very tip of the cochlea, out there where, again, in the picture on 1212, picture 1212 on 461, at the very tip there where the helicotrema label is found, that's where we sense the very lowest frequencies, or the lowest notes, or lowest sounds, while the very highest frequencies are experienced very close to the oval window portion of the cochlea, and intermediate frequencies. So, la 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 la, those sounds are being being picked up very close to the oval window, and all the intermediate frequency vibrations. So from the very high, those intermediate tones are being picked up at intermediate locations along the length of the cochlea. So as the auditory ossicles vibrate, they vibrate against the oval window. And the oval window then transfers pressure waves in the endolymph through the length of the cochlear duct. There's also pressure waves in the perilymph, because the oval window covers both the both the cochlear duct and the scala vestibuli and the scala tympani. So there are also pressure waves that are found in the perilymph, and the scala tympani connects to the round, connects to the round window of the cochlea, and the round window allows for some, it also vibrates in response to the pressure in the perilymph, and that helps to bleed off some of the pressure so that we don't, again, to prevent harming the hair cells, which would result in deafness if those hair cells are damaged. So as the endolymph moves because of the vibrations at the oval window, the stereocilia will also move, and depending on the frequency of the vibrations, the stereocilia at different locations along the cochlea move. And as they move, as they deflect from side to side, then that creates local potential changes in the hair cell, at the membrane of the hair cell. And if there's sufficient stimulation, then the hair cell will generate an action potential along the axon of the hair cell, and that will then produce sensory input along the vestibulocochlear nerve, and it will take the cochlear branch. So auditory sensations are sent along the cochlear branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve to the auditory cortex in the temporal lobes of the brain. And it carries them by way of the thalamus. So everything goes through the thalamus. And then those sensations arrive at the temporal lobes of the brain, and we interpret them as sound there at the temporal lobes. So that is how we hear. And it's all because of Meccano Reception that's happening there at the hair cells along the tectorial membrane of the cochlear duct of the cochlea. Okay, so that's hearing. So let's talk then about equilibrium. And we'll start first by talking about static equilibrium. So static equilibrium is about telling the position of the head when the head is still. So if you were to stand on your head and stay in that standing on your head position, then your head would be still, but your head would be upside down, and you would notice that. If you were to bend forward at the waist and then hold still, then your head would be at a 45-degree angle to the normal standing up position. I'm sorry, at a 90-degree angle to the normal standing position. And static equilibrium would talk to your brain about where your head is located. The same if you were to bend sideways at the waist, or if you were to do a back bend and slowly arc yourself backward and then hold still. Again, static equilibrium would be letting you know the position of your head. And so it helps to maintain stability and posture as your cerebellum integrates that information with what your eyes are seeing and with what proprioceptors around the rest of your body are noticing. So we receive static equilibrium information from two organs that are found in the inner ear. And the organs are referred to as the utricle and the saccule. They are found inside the utricle and saccules of the vestibule of the inner ear. And so the utricle and the saccule are two expanded chambers of the vestibule and of the membranous labyrinth. So we've got these chambers in the membranous labyrinth. And on the membranous labyrinth of these two chambers are these structures that are referred to as macula, the macula. The plural would be maculae. There we are. And the maculae are small patches of, again, hair cells, and they have stereocilia that are embedded in a gelatinous sheet of material with a layer of what are referred to as otoliths. So if you're looking on page 466, you can see figure 12:18. And what you're seeing there is the macula. And the macula consists of these hair cells, and you can see them there. And the stereocilia of the hair cells are embedded in this gelatinous membrane. And actually there's a layer on top of this gelatinous membrane. We have a layer of otoliths. Otoliths are just small, tiny crystals of calcium carbonate. And so they are layered on top of this gel. The utricle hairs, they're found with the hairs projecting vertically, and the gelatinous sheet would be horizontal. The hair cells of the saccule, their hairs project horizontally, and their gelatinous sheet is vertical then. So as the head changes position, so if you were to move your head forward, then the macula of the, now I've got to go back and look, sorry. The macula of the saccule would lean forward. Is that right? The macula of the saccule lean forward. No, I'm sorry. The macula of the utricle would lean forward, and the otoliths, because of their weight, and because they're more dense than the gelatin stuff, they're going to cause that gelatinous membrane or gelatinous sheet to sag. And as the gelatinous sheet sags, that's going to deflect the stereocilia. And as a result of that, then there will be action potentials generated along the vestibular branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve. And those sensations will be sent via, again, the thalamus to the cerebellum, where we would then interpret that information along with the visual information that we're receiving as we begin to look down at our bellies or maybe down at the ground. And we would then get a perception of the position of the head relative to gravity. So again, all of this would be when the head is still. That's when we use the sense of static equilibrium. Now, if you start to move your body, and as a result of that, move the head. So let's imagine you're going for a run, and your head is bobbing up and down, and your head is also moving forward in space. Then it's the sense of dynamic equilibrium that is noticing this. Dynamic equilibrium, its sensation is felt with the semicircular canals. And there are 3 semicircular canals. These are bony channels of the labyrinth. And they are in the 3 planes, closely approximating the 3 planes that we talked about in Chapter 1 of the body. So one of the semicircular canals is in the frontal plane, one is in the sagittal plane, and the third is in the transverse plane. So we can collect information in 3 dimensions about how the head and of course then the body are moving 3-dimensionally as we move across the surface of the earth. So where each of the canals connects to the saccule, there's an enlarged space. It's called the ampulla, and in it is the organ of dynamic equilibrium, the crista ampullaris. That's the sensory organ, and a picture of that is found on page 467. The crista ampullaris consists of, again, hair cells. So once more, this is Meccano Reception. And those hair cells are embedded in a mass of gelatinous material that's referred to as the cupola. So we have the cupola that looks like this gelatin cap that houses the stereocilia of the hair cells. So as the head and body move, the perilymph sloshes back and forth. So this time, just like unlike with hearing, where hearing is about the endolymph, with equilibrium, the hair cells are moved thanks to sloshing back and forth of the perilymph inside the 3 semicircular tubes. And that causes the cupola to deflect from side to side. And as the cupola deflects, then we feel those deflections, or the hair cells recognize those reflections as deflections, as local membrane potentials, and once again, with sufficient stimulation, then we generate an action potential in the axons of the neurons of the vestibular branch of the vestibulocochlear nerve. And that gives us that sense then of how the head is moving forward, side to side, or up and down. So the cerebellum interprets the sensations that are coming from the maculae of the utricle and the saccule, and from the crista ampullaris of the 3 semicircular canals. It integrates those sensations and then provides for us the perception of how we're experiencing the environment. And so the cerebellum adjusts then the signals that it's sending out to the skeletal muscles that are located throughout the periphery of the body, so that we can respond to changes of the body, changes of location of the body, in conjunction with the I just lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. So finally, let me just put it all together then. The cerebellum then will, through reflexive control, change the tension in the muscles of the legs or other parts of the body to help maintain balance as we move through our environment. There, that's what I was hoping to say. All right, so there we are. The sensations of both hearing and of the equilibrium of the body, all associated with the organs of the inner ear as received through the movements of the body. All right, so one last chapter, or one last section. This is the section you've been looking for all semester. So in the next video, we'll take a look at vision.